edition of Art Matters that Raza Foundation has been organizing in collaboration with the India International Center. We are about to complete 10 years of existence for this series, and we are very happy that the 79th session is focused on a major Hindi writer, Agyeya. There are two parts to this evening. First part, we have Vidya Shah, well-known singer, singing some poems of Agyeya, to be followed by a conversation with Akshaya Mukul and me, talking about the book, about Agyeya, and about all such matters that may be relevant to, full stop. So may I invite Vidya Shah, who is a well-known singer, and she is accompanied on tabla by Shanti Bhushan Jha, and on harmonium by Ashok
Kumar.
Ashok Kumar.
Well, a couple of years ago, Akshay and I were just having a very, very casual conversation, and he told me that he's working on this seminal book, and I have no idea, and I'm trying to remember why I said this to him. मैंने भी एक चीज़ गाई है अग्यय की, and that was the day. Since that time, he has been sort of slowly and very, very persistently pursuing me on putting together something for this evening. Of course, most recently we had a conversation, Akshay, Ashok ji and I, where the one thing that comes up almost like a refrain in the context of his work is Agyeya का जो काम है वो इतना गेय नहीं है. So that is going to be my disclaimer this evening from where I begin. मैंने कोशिश की है कुछ चीज़ें राग में बिठाने की, और आज शाम को आपके सामने 4 ऐसी चीज़ें पेश करना चाहूँगी. इजाज़त चाहती हूँ. अगली कविता का आप टाइटल भी पूछ रहे थे मुझसे। कविता का शीर्षक है शरद जो आया। ये तो है कि जो कविताएं हैं वो बहुत वर्बोस हैं, छंद में नहीं है, तो नज्म जैसे हैं एक तरह से कि उनको बट ये लाउड हो रहा है क्या? चलेगा। हाँ टर्म्स थीमेटिकली मैं देख रही थी कि क्या कुछ जो मोर पावरफुल, मोर पॉलिटिकल, उस तरह से जो भी चीज़ें हैं, जब मैंने अक्षय को पूछा कि भाई कुछ बताओ कि क्या गाया जा सकता है, सो ही वेरी पोलाइटली गेव मी टू कलेक्शंस ऑफ रियली बल्कि वंस, इसमें देख लो तो और ऐसी महफिल में मुझे अक्सर मन करता है कि कह दूं यार मैं तो वैसे मूल मद्रासी हूँ, क्योंकि इतने बड़े बड़े दिग्गज लोग, अशोक जी हैं, ओम जी हैं, पीछे मृणाल जी हैं, बहुत बड़े बड़े लोग हैं, तो थोड़ी बहुत जो हिंदी में मैं बेशर्मी से गाती आ रही हूँ, कभी कभी लगता है कि यहाँ पे जाके थोड़ा कुछ गड़बड़ा ना जाए, बट इट ऑल हैज़ टू डू विद द पोएट्री। तो ये जो है अगली चीज़ जो है, इसका टाइटल है घृणा का गान, और कुछ चीज़ें बहुत टॉपिकल भी लगती हैं, उनमें से शायद ये भी एक है। तानी क्यों बजा रहे हो? सुनो 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 सुनो, तुम्हें ललकार रहा हूँ, सुनो घृणा का गान, सुनो तुम्हें ललकार रहा हूँ, सुनो घृणा का गान, सुनो तुम्हें ललकार रहा हूँ, सुनो घृणा का केशव पर आसीन, चांदनी, वाकई बहुत सुंदर कविता है। चलो
It is an important moment in the posthumous life of Agyeya. He died several decades ago. His birth centenary took place 11 years ago. But this biography is a milestone in Agyeya's own literary career, now destined to be posthumous. Akshaya Mukul was an unlikely candidate, in my eyes, to be writing about Agyeya, although he had done an excellent book on Gita Press. So when he said that he was going to write a biography of Agyeya, although I welcomed it openly and also offered him the Raza Fellowship for that, but I had my doubts. I usually doubt journalists, including some of my friends, although some of them have been my very close friends. But this biography, incidentally, which runs, the proper biography runs into 560 odd pages. And it has 200 odd pages by way of references. It's a very well researched biography. Luckily, Akshay had the access to Agyeya papers, which were with Vatsalnidhi and in the custody of Om Thanvi. So there is a lot of material in this which has not been in the public domain at all. I'll not go into the fact that there are references and episodes and letters cited even relating to me, which I had completely forgotten. I did not have a memory that at the age of 18, I had the audacity to write to Agyeya something from a small town called Sagar. Yeah. Anyway, that will come to me. But this is a biography which sets as Harish Trivedi was telling me during tea time, that it sets a mark, it's a high benchmark for biography writing. Raza Foundation has been carrying out a project of getting biographies in Hindi written of writers and artists and other people, and we have published quite a few. Some of them are well researched, but none of them can match the range, the depth, the objectivity, the fair-mindedness, and not being obsessed. Agyeya was someone with whom you had very strong likes and dislikes. There are many people, and some of them must be in this hall as well, who never liked it. Give them whatever evidence you can, and they were never convinced. And there are others who will never believe in any evidence which might be contrary to their image of Agyeya. What comes out in this biography, that Agyeya is a human being, and that he has his failures and foibles, but also that he dominated the literary scene in Hindi for nearly 4 decades. And there was a time, I remember, when if you had not had an opinion about Agyeya, you were not thought to be an authentic Hindi writer. I mean, you have to have an opinion about him. You have to have something to say about Agyeya. So it's a biography which brings forth the humanness, the human warmth, vision, etc. There are many things which we are going to talk about. But let me first ask, because there is an interesting episode here given, that you decided to write the biography when Kumar Gandhar mentioned to you something about Agyeya.
Yeah, that I remembered very vividly. The 89, the summer of 1989, and I used to be kind of a very miniature Yaya and we used to roam around, be part of this movement, be part of that, just go and do, satsang. As he used to say, ki तानसेन तो बनोगे नहीं कानसेन बन जाओ कम से कम. Yeah, because he'll say you smoke and you drink and there's no way you have any future in music. So while hanging out in one of these places, and that was, in fact, I rechecked with many people who were there in the evening, that in Mata Ki Tekri, and so Agyeya stayed with me. Look at this man. He openly says that I'm not a Hindi bhasi, so to speak. 87, he had just done that. 86, Agyeya's 75th birthday, he had sung in his house in Caventer's Lane, and he said I had this conversation. And which I remembered. And many years later, while I was writing on his centenary in 2011, I remember talking to you then, and that poem came up. And for some reason, I had saved this Kumarji's encounter for some later date, for some bigger article or something. I didn't know it will come as a book or in the acknowledgement of the book. And I thought it was a fitting tribute to Kumarji. Someone who's been kind of very, very instrumental in my whole music learning and everything. Yeah.
The image of Agyeya has been that of a writer who was very keen on his self-respect, very well preserved dignity, and a liberal vision. Now, in your biographical exploration and after having written the book, do you think that this image gets confirmed, in some sense affirmed, or seriously eroded?
I will not say eroded. As you said in the beginning, his humanness comes out.
Yeah.
Because even on both sides, people who love Agyeya and those who hate Agyeya, and Hindi world is vertically divided even now. The people who love him, people who hate him, hate him. You can do whatever you want, it will not change. So yes, his humanness comes out. Anyway, if you're a biography reader, you will know that too much is being made out of this man, of his solitude, his melancholy, as a man who will do nothing wrong. That's not possible. That's so boring life. If at all, if one leads a life like that. And again, you see his papers, is full of follies, is full of foibles. He has his mood swings. He makes friends and abandons them. He's like anyone else. No one, right from, if you see 1930, 31, when first Janendra, and they get in touch, and so no friendship stays for long. What is it about this man? And Mukund Lath somehow explained it over his, Mukund Lath being Mukund Lath. He says, I always sat on the third row of this thing. And time with Agyeya, place change, people change, friendship change, lovers change, everything change. And his Yayavari also brings. So I got to explore that. And you see a man who's full of all this, but yet he's a dignified writer, yet he has a self-respect. So he's not full of he's not only full of follies, he has his follies, but he's also a dignified writer. He takes stand, he takes position when none. His concerns are cosmopolitan, universal concerns. When no one talks of environment, he's talking of environment. He's talking of movement. He has come from a movement. He has spent 4 years in jail. How many Hindi writers we know who spent 4 years, and they were torturous 4 years in jail?
Well, about his being jailed.
Yeah.
And you have given great details of how he contested his own case in the court, and how both in terms of facts and in terms of argument, he was very, very effective. Could you tell us something about that?
Yeah, in fact, if you see the papers right on early when they were trying to get a battery of lawyers and Congress was helping them, they had created a fund for these revolutionaries. Revolutionaries themselves were a divided lot, which is a separate story. And one of the first names of lawyers is Saifuddin Kichlu. And the government documents say, who is this Vatsayana? They spell him as Watysyana. His spelling keeps getting changed. And they say he wants to argue his own case. And subsequently you find he's arguing throughout, he's coming with arguments not only for himself, but on behalf of 16, 17 others. And he's fairly good at it, and British officials are recognizing it. He says that, oh God, this guy comes up with new tricks, and all the things that I have written, it's great detail. It was a nightmare for the editor to cut it, and she actually cut 10,000. She said, you have become obsessive about this. So what you see is 10,000 word less. So,
If the editor sitting there.
yeah, editor and two editors who are not here, who were like, one is gone over to US, one is in Bangalore. So they had to do that work, and they said, you have become obsessive. Because every day they're coming up with a new tactic. And mind you, after 4 years, British government says, now put them back in magistrates court. This whole commission of inquiry has failed, and they've spent money after money, and they've spent a lot of money getting the judges, the 3 members in the commission, and it's going nowhere.
One of the impressions, one gets after reading this biography is that ultimately Agyey's concern was, under all circumstances, with all that was happening to him, to become a writer.
Yeah.
I mean, his lifetime aim seems to be, so everything that he has experiences in his love relationships and things of that kind, everything ultimately is used up in some way or the other in his writing.
Yeah.
So here is a man who's wanting at all costs to become and to remain a writer.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes, it is true. In fact, if you see, one of his main concerns when he starts writing in jail, and that's when he's writing even when he's a student in Madras Christian College, and he's meticulous. Is annoyingly meticulous. He'll write that 11:30 night he started writing poetry. When he's not able to write poetry, he's just copying from Abanindranath Tagore or some Tagore poem or this or that, and he's rhyming at that age. And the whole thing is that I will not be able to write if I am in jail for far too long. So if you see at the far end of this whole journey in jail, he comes up with, I was never present, I was never a scientist, I was never a bomb maker. That seems to ploy to get out. And that's where he starts writing Sekhar. As the first title is Usantare. It's not Sekhar Ek Jivni. And with the first page he writes to Janendra Kumar saying that I don't know what a grand thing I'm writing. He's also pompous. For his age, he's 19, 20 years old, he's in jail, he's saying, I can't believe what I'm writing, and and this is going to be something really big. And mind you, before Sekhar becomes Sekhar, Usantare, the various versions of Usantare has been seen by Janendra, has been seen by Banarsidas Chaturbedi, and everyone is talking about Usantare. His brother sees it, brother realizes that the characters are just too close home. They're inside the 4 walls of the house. And he says, my father is not going to like it. And father turns the pages in Baroda, the manuscript has arrived, and he says, father is furious that what wrong did I do? So throughout, you see his concern is writing. And at one point, his youngest sister, Anandlata, when he is very frustrated and he says, I'll give up writing. And she teases him, will you not give? What happened to your ambition to get Nobel Prize? So he's fiercely ambitious also. Mind you, this is in his late 20s when younger sister is teasing him. Don't give up writing, you have to get Nobel Prize. So that's there. And that concern throughout. And he uses everything that is happening in his life as a fodder. And this is a perfect fodder. Everything, actually, if you see some of his poems, especially in Sagar Mudra, they are so close home. What was happening to him in Berkeley. That's where he has met Ilaji. And you can see बाहें फैलाए हुए मेरी तरफ आती हुई पूछती कि तुम समुद्र क्यों नहीं हो. हाँ, फिर वो ये रस्सी वो जो नाच कोई हमारी नाच नहीं देखता. It's just a concern, his own frustration, what is happening in his own life. If you see tight up, you will see that that's the time when his marriage with Kamladevi is just gone astray. So he's not really bringing it in novel like Nadi Ke Dweep or Sekhar, but even in his poems. Yeah.
Now that you mentioned Kapilaji, Kapilaji has an official biography.
Yeah.
Incidentally, also written by a journalist.
Yeah, I know.
And it mentions Vatsyayanji, if I remember correctly, perhaps once. And also as kind of in a passing,
Yes.
that biography has something like 2,000 names of all,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a who's who of culture in India during her time.
Yeah.
But there is very little mention, none at all.
Yeah.
And you seem to have also not got much from her.
I tried my best. Everyone I know tried. Thanviji tried. Everyone. I used all the tricks in the trade. I'll go and meet and just sit before her with a complete crying face that, someday the old lady will melt. She didn't. Last I met her was in 2020 February. And that's when she said, you just don't understand love. It doesn't end with a man walking out of the house and I decided I'm not going to trouble her anymore. But despite that, if you find a lot of her letters, because Agyeya was so meticulous, so some of her early letters, when they were kind of romancing, you find those letters, and you also find the miserable phase of Kapila Vatsayana, and all women become eventually very miserable in their relationship with Agyeya. So you find that miserable, like a lady who is so successful, who's exceptionally bright in her own way, is just kind of her whole life revolves around Agyeya's happiness or not happiness, whether she wants to take a house in Moti Bagh which will have termite or no termite, he's deciding it from Berkeley. She doesn't have any right to do this. He says, don't take a house on the ground floor because I don't want termites to destroy my book. So Kapilaji, like all other women in his life, he faced this problem. So yes, there is a gap which I couldn't do much about because she just, and in that biography of hers, it's just passing reference, as you said, about some chai adda or some Mohan Singh place coffee thing where she talks, Vatsayan used to sit, that's all. No talk about marriage, nothing, yeah.
Since you mentioned Agyeya's relationship with women and all of them feeling sooner or later miserable, do you think this in some way cuts into his moral universe? Is his moral universe by this gets somewhat diminished?
I know it's tough to say, but diminish. See, in his whatever comes out in his interaction with women and the women he knew, and I talked to many of them who are all in the late 80s and early 90s. Everyone had to say he was immensely respectful to women. He had few quirks about women. He had few theories about women. He says women don't have sense of humor. Agyeya's basic take, which he writes in one of his essays. And he says, what kind of ideal women am I looking for? He says, someone who has a sense of humor. Women lack sense of humor. And then he talks about physical beauty. He loves eyes and gait and all that. Yeah. So, I don't think it gets diminished. Maybe it puts him, it shows him as any ordinary man, and a man who has, who's extractive maybe in some ways, and he leaves them miserable, all of them. But still, you can see that if you read Nadi Ke Dweep after reading Kripa Sen's letters, I realized that, well, in a way, he's telling everything to us. We didn't know what this was really actually happening in his life. And the Rekha of Nadi Ke Dweep, it's just Kripa Sen. And
Kripa Sen, incidentally, is your discovery. Because I had never heard of Kripa Sen. We most knew other relationships, but this was out of our knowledge. And it's quite a discovery in that sense.
Yeah, it's more than that. It's discovery. If I was more excited to see that she's actually the Rekha of Nadi Ke Dweep, and the real letters which is writing Kripa has actually just been put in Nadi Ke Dweep.
Yeah.
If you see this whole argument which is happening about going to war or not going to war, and in Atman Parak, that volume which came up, that later gets published without the name to whom was addressed. It's Dear X or something. So everything comes in this thing. And she's probably the only woman in his life who refuses to be miserable, although she ends up miserable. She gives it back. All other women are like, it's a kind of one-way street with him. Kripa is not. Kripa tells, I'm a Maratha woman, what kind of silence is this? I know how to get back at you. She sulks, everything that lover does. So, yeah, she's the most remarkable of Agye's lovers.
Now, Agyeya, even when he was a writer, was already involved in politics.
Yeah.
And as he proceeds, after the jail term is over and case is over, he joins Sainik in
Agra.
And you have given in great details the fact that he was in touch with the Kisan Andolan and which grassroots politics. Would you tell us something? Because the image we have is either he was a revolutionary and then he became a reactionary. So from the revolutionary period, he lapsed into a reactionary.
No, this is a very important phase of Agyeya actually. This is, he says he realizes in Agra that the work is only of 2 days. So some time during the week is spent in Chirgaon with the Gupt brothers, mostly Matrishan and Gupt. And his Meerut connection, here Meerut, Indumati is working, in Hombati ki wajah se, he gets into this Kisan Andolan. There is a correspondence between him and Nehru, where he's saying, I'm getting a delegation to Delhi. And Nehru says, I don't know whether I will be able to address it. Good, you're doing it. But Nehru says how demands should be met and don't expect immediately these things to happen, what you demand. And that's also the period when, that's also the time when M.N. Roy is traveling through United Provinces. And that's when he meets. And you see so much of M.N. Roy in Sainik, which is entirely Agye's doing. Basically, Krishnadat Paliwal was a kind of an absentee editor. And Agyeya was running the show. Therefore, suddenly when he finds these aphrodisiac ads are coming in Sainik, he says, what is happening here? And he quits. He says, he barely stays there, not even for a year. But so this is a very crucial phase in his political formation, of his ideological formation. And he and M.N. Roy were friends for life. In fact, he kept on this big interview he gave to Duke University, where he said, if anything, I will closest to M.N. Roy, and I want to be known as an anarchist. And closest to, I'm not close to anyone else.
But later, he was behind the anti-fascist conference, in which Mulkraj Anand and
everyone came. Everyone came.
So tell us something about that.
That was also a phase you find everyone. If Prabhakar Machwe has written in great detail about that meeting, who came. So everyone is meeting. In fact, Mukti Bodh's first meeting happens, I think, with Agyeya there in that meeting. And they keep on, after that they're corresponding, showing stories and poems to Agyeya. So, but Agyeya also realized that despite that, after that meeting, you find a similar meeting is being planned somewhere in, I think, Allahabad or Banaras, where the left group is trying to not call him or kind of run a propaganda that how this was not actually a complete anti-fascist thing. And already he is very, very uncertain. He never believes the left guys because they have been at him since 1941. Sekhar comes and they have been at him. And then when this one comes, Sekhar, and then Nadi Ke Dweep comes, the attack, which is later, it becomes very fierce. So Agye's this entire anti-fascism, so he stayed fast with his resolve on anti-fascism. So whereas other authors are busy taking stand position of being fascist, supporting the British government or not supporting the British government, he says, no, let me take the next step. Go and join the army, which has been kind of misunderstood as the stews of the British government or something. I don't know what it means because eventually of all the writers of that period, if you see, both left, right or whatever, center, he's the only one who never joins government actually. Even the AIR job, which is done for some time, and then he says, can you make it permanent? They say, no, now there is a UPSC. You apply through UPSC. And he's completely devastated. I've been working on this lexicon, he was working on various things, All India Radio, he was doing programs. He never gets a job. So I don't know what this British stooge meant. It never comes out. It doesn't help him anyway. His Yayavari continues, and he always lacks money. He's in fact telling Nemi Chand Jain and Rekha Jain that, look, if you guys need speaker, तुम लोग इप्टा में हो, कुछ चाहिए तो हमसे ले लो. मैं सब कुछ बेचने को तैयार हूँ क्योंकि मुझे पैसा चाहिए प्रतीक के लिए. When he comes out of it, he says, तुम लोग कहीं भी कुछ
But
करना.
the image of Agyeya has been that he is an aristocrat,
Yeah.
that he seemed to have a lot of money, and that he is your biography makes out that he is always short of money.
Always sort of money. It just see, lot of this thing about Agyeya also gets from because of he's completely different from his generation of Hindi writers. He's not your Mofussil town or a village, rural background. He's son of a colonial officer who's a senior officer, and he's seeing the world, being born in open field, going to various places of interest. His father takes him on a long journey. He goes to Utkaman, so he's and goes to Madras Christian College. So his cultural thing is completely different from. So right from the beginning, there is this whole myth about Agyeya. He looks odd man out for the Hindi world. He's not your usual Hindi guy, and his concerns are different. He probably the only person whose relationships are most easily talked about in Hindi world. Then I don't know about previous generation that much, but much as I tried, I couldn't find anything except lurid gossip about various Hindi writers. He's the only one whose relationships, and now when you see his papers, they're all out there. He was writing, he was skipping those papers also. Good for the biographer.
What about his association with the Congress for Cultural Freedom, which has been a major point of attack of the left?
See, Congress for Cultural Freedom, yes, he's the first secretary, and it happened just a year after it comes up in Berlin, and he's a key person. He's the man who's organized 10 days before it is to be held in Delhi. Delhi was the first venue, and Nehru says no. Nehru intelligence reports, and MEA is telling Nehru, don't let them happen, let these guys come, because Nehru is being told all very anti-Russian guys, all Americans are coming, Arthur Koestler is coming, this one is coming, that one is, and some big guns were coming. So in 10 days time, Minu Masani's DRI, the Democratic Research Institute and others, they managed to do this. It's a miracle they did it in those days. So he's involved. Some unsavory incidents happen, which James Burnham writes in private papers in Stanford, you can see. He seems to have put the money which came for the event in another account of Thought magazine, which was seen as a kind of financial misappropriation, and Philip Spratt comes in, and Philip Spratt starts handling the entire CCF. So that association is very brief, if you say, but he maintained personal relations with many of them. Ceylon, for instance, many other writers, he's writing to them. And in fact, at one stage, Philip Spratt had to write these guys in Paris saying that don't interact with him. He's no longer with CCF. But he builds that personal relations which stays till late. Even in the 60s when he's in Europe, he's meeting them, he's in touch with the entire CCF gang, but in a completely dissociated. In fact, you will find a very strange thing. The Quest magazine I thought Quest was publishing all kinds of things, and they were heavily into translation. You will find only one translation of Agyeya's poems. 2 poems were translated. For some reason, Quest sunned him. There has to be some. It's not innocent. That sunning doesn't look innocent. Yeah.
Well, you seem to have left out in detail the writing of Shekhar itself. You sort of suddenly it appears now Shekhar. So the story before.
No, actually, if you see the jail diary, which is in great detail. It was in even greater detail. It was another of my obsession which got cut by the editors, and now I think thankfully so. Was its entire diary is actually the first draft of Shekhar, and it gets for a long time it's Usantarer. Shekhar title comes much later. So therefore, in fact, another friend of mine who also read that Shekhar, there is not much on Shekhar. Then I said, you just read comprehensively from jail. That's when, very early days, within few months in jail, he says, what I'm going to write is going to be grand. And the grand thing is Sekar, which eventually takes another 10 years to come out.
Agye's first language was not Hindi. He decided to write in Hindi. And he wrote a lot in English. In fact, in the newspaper you worked earlier, there used to be a column. When I was in St. Stephen's, I used to read it every fortnightly. It was called a literary causerie.
Remarkable column. Remarkable column.
Yeah. What do you think? What made him write in Hindi rather than, let's say, in English?
I think because later on, of course, he became a whole votary of, you should write in your mother tongue. Anyone who doesn't write in mother tongue is not doing service. And he was very dismissive of Indian writers in English. But I think partly it's his home schooling, home education, where he's exposed to all literature. You see some Persian guys coming to teach, some Sanskrit guys coming. And he talks about poets like Sridhar Pathak, Gupt. These are the poets he's reading. So, and a lot of that he's writing, and somewhere between, I think by the time he goes to jail, he's even jail, most of, even say Sekhar's first draft, if you see, it's in English.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So, but he switches, and that's the period when he got into writing in Hindi. But वो जो कहते हैं ना, उनको ये मलाल हमेशा रहा कि हिंदी वाले मुझे अपना नहीं मानते. 86 में अगर आप देखें किसी को चिट्ठी लिख रहे कि हिंदी वाले तो मुझे कभी माना ही नहीं अपना. अब तो मेरी किताबों का कोई रिव्यू भी नहीं छपता है. And then he attacks you in Naya Pratik much before. He says, you know, what he's running in Bhopal about your thing. And this whole fight which happens of going to Bhopal or not going to Bhopal. So he has, his ultimate thing was, I remained a rank outsider for Hindi world. And so yeah, that's it, because Hindi, and I think there is some, he became his position also became very, rigid later on about this whole writing in Hindi or writing in your mother tongue. And it's almost borders on chauvinism, language chauvinism later on, where he's very dismissive of anyone who's writing. He talks so ill of Niraj Chaudhary, his friend Mulk Raj Anand, everyone. And, but yeah, Hindi it remained his language also because his Hindi was, at one point he says, my Hindi is so different that maybe people take time to understand. He's telling Ramesh Sonap of Duke University, he asked, why do you write Hindi, which is, so he said, this is the Hindi that I've learned. And partly it's his homeschooling, where he's reading everything from the text. He's reading Ved, or he's reading Quran, or reading any of these texts. So he could quote, he could write. So that crept into his Hindi. Only later we changed, his Hindi had changed. Early days जो छायावाद के जो फेज है उसमें you can see he's doing तुकबंदी, पूछ लूं क्या नाम तेरा, तो उस तरह की कविताएं लिखते हैं. बाद में he becomes, but then he also becomes very deep, his poems, and he knows that people are not getting me, they're not easy to understand, I'm not easy to understand. But then his take was, why should everything be easy, why should everything be served on platter?
One of the things that you have discovered in his paper is my letter.
Yeah.
Which I had the audacity to write to him at the age of 18. In response to a letter that he has written to me, अब मैं लिखना छोड़ना चाहता हूँ. I mean, this is amazing, and I am advising him कि नहीं ऐसा मत करिए, आप एक नई पुस्तक.
See, that I found remarkable, and that in a way explains, that in a way also sets at rest this whole thing about Agyeya being aloof, being a chuppa, as they say in Hindi, being a kind of not trying to interact with the world. Why should he, who has established himself, be taking you so seriously? You are all of 18. And you give him a lot of trouble later, but even at 18 you are giving him trouble. At 18 you are telling him, I didn't like the cover of this book. What kind of cover is this? You are telling him, why aren't you reading Nirmal Verma? Or, Nirmal Verma की बहुत कहानियाँ आ रही है, अब Nirmal Verma बड़े नए लेखक हैं. and he's telling you, "मैं हिंदी छोड़ दूंगा." I was completely blown by that exchange. So why is he telling 18-year-old boy sitting in Sagar, taking on, and I thought you were having some fun, basically telling a big writer, which he did as a 19-year-old or 20, I think he was maybe 22 when he writes. He says Nirala is dead, so I don't want to talk about Nirala.
Yeah.
So I thought it's like it's come to revisit again. Someone is telling him now that I didn't like your poem. This cover is not good, and then he takes so seriously. He responds to that.
I remember an episode. He came to Sagar. We invited him to inaugurate the Students' Union of the university. He was 47. Nandulare Vajpeyi, who was the head of the department.
Yeah, I write about it in the book.
Is there. He went out of the city, and the Hindi department people attended. Only 2 of them attended. The rest didn't come. So Agyeya he had just returned from Japan. So he had brought a collection of poems called Ariyo Karuna Prabhame, which is a very Japanese book, very Buddhist book.
Very Buddhist.
And there were 2 poems, Naya Kavi A, Tu A, maybe sort of. And he while reading them, he said, "ये थोड़ा journalism है." तो ठीक है. उसके बाद क्या हुआ कि आकाशवाणी पर एक कवि सभा होती थी गणतंत्र दिवस पर. तो उसमें अज्ञेय जी ने वो कविता पढ़ी जिसको उन्होंने जर्नलिज्म कहा था. तो मैंने उनको चिट्ठी लिखी कि आपने तो यहाँ कहा था कि ये I was not to be let down. So सर ये क्या बात है, इतनी अच्छी कविताएं उसमें भी पढ़ी आपने और ये कविता पढ़ी, ये इसका क्या वो है, औचित्य है. अब मुझे याद नहीं कि उन्होंने क्या जवाब दिया. But the other thing that I wrote to him, to which I did not get a reply. उन दिनों हम लोग मुक्तिबोध के पहले कविता संग्रह के छपाने की चेष्टा कर रहे थे. So I wrote to Agyeya कि किसी तरह से if you can get, because by that time Agyeya had got some books published by Gyanpit. Now Agyeya did not reply to it. He didn't say anything about it. Now, as I look into your biography, you mention his correspondence with Muktibodh. In fact, it is on record that when a new edition of Tar Saptak was being taken out, Muktibodh sent a poem, and Agyeya got it and immediately rushed to Sahitya Academy to read it out to Bharat Bhushan Agarwal and Prabhakar Machwe, and wrote back saying to Muktibodh that this is a wonderful poem and it will be the achievement of the new edition. But the image that got built in Hindi was there's some kind of a rivalry between the two.
which is completely blown out of proportion. There was none, if you ask me. If anything, it was done post Muktibodh. So much so that I cite one Alochana article in the book where they did a pie chart comparing Muktibodh and Agyeya. कि किसमें सौंदर्य ज़्यादा है, किसमें कामुकता ज़्यादा है, किसमें प्रकृति का वर्णन ज़्यादा है, which I found was like astounding to someone, Alochana like our magazine, to carry it. How can again Muktibodh be even compared? 2 different poets, 2 different contexts, and you just see the kind of the way unburdening that Muktibodh does in front of Agyeya. The way he says, "This is a conceit of our times, I have written this, is it good?" So they had a very respectful, mutual respectful kind of relationship. So only I think this post Muktibodh and this whole Muktibodh is being built in the late 60s, 70s, and I find that at the end of it, Agyeya is annoyed about it. He, even in the Duke University interview, he said that, look, his politics was great, he was a very political man, but there was something wrong with his language. He's dismissive. In that interview, he's dismissive of the whole world except himself and maybe Maitri Sarangupta. So he says the language is a problem. Nagarjuna, he doesn't even consider him a poet. So that he does. But it was completely blown out of proportion, I think, between Agyeya and Muktibodh.
Because I think in his selected poems, he wrote an introduction in which he mentions several of these poets, Tilochan and Nagarjun, and says what could be learned from them. तिलोचन से लय सीखी जा सकती है, नागार्जुन से ये सीखा जा सकता है. So it was not as if
it was not. It was not.
But that kind of a image gets. What about his journalism?
See, his journalism is actually fine. It's an aspect of his cosmopolitanism which you see in display. And now let's take the journals which he first, Sainik for instance. Look at the stuff that he's carrying in Sainik. He is Stri Vimarsh, nationalism. One of the best pieces of nationalism, Jainendra Kumar's piece where he says कि बंदे मातरम, आज के ज़माने में अगर वो जैनेंद्र वो पीस लिखते तो पता नहीं जैनेंद्र का क्या हाल होता. वो कहते बंदे मातरम कोई ज़रूरी नहीं है नेशनलिज्म के कोई ये द्योतक नहीं है, कोई ये इंडिकेटर नहीं है. तो उस तरह की चीज़ें health की इशू मानी वो basically it's a pull out Sainik by our current standards, some 8 or 12 pages, but he's bringing everything. Then once he reaches Bisal Bharat, he's trying to change it and come out of the shadow of Banarsi Das Chaturvedi, who's not an easy guy to deal with. And Banarsi Das Chaturvedi problem is that he wants to remote control Bisal Bharat, which he doesn't let. In fact, Agyeya does many things. You will find the writings, some remarkable writings on art on Bengali artists and getting new people to write on art. He is reaching out to people. So much so that he even takes on the owner of Bisal Bharat. There's a huge fight that happens between him and Ramanand Chatterjee. So he tells Ramanand Chatterjee that you are anti-Hindi. He says, what are you saying? I incur a loss of 17,000 rupees a month to run this Bisal Bharat, which is running in loss. Just because I'm Bengali, you are getting after my life. And he's very respectful. Agyeya actually writes first in the magazine. And Ramanand Chatterjee writes him privately. That what are you doing? And they get on. He also doesn't kind of lie low. He gives it back to him. So, and then if you see, then you come to Pratik. The kind of stuff, and he's always doing news. Sarad, वो जिस तरह से वो महीने वो मौसम के हिसाब से वो निकालते हैं, हाँ, और उसमें तरह की चीजें, मतलब the feature, and he's also trying to be different from the existing journals, the Chand and the Hans of the world. He's getting modern people to write. In fact, I remember a long encounter, I think Krishna Sopti. In fact, someone like, I think Trisha wrote a marvelous piece on that encounter when the day Agyeya accepts her story and what happens, and the new writers who are writing. Naya Pratik again. Imagine writing, getting articles on science in Hindi on great, deep mathematical issues. You find the environmental concerns. And Chandi Prasad Bhatt told me that he'll call him when Navara Times and Dinman, he'll call him there. He says, तुम जो देख रहे हो लिख कर भेज दो, बाकी मैं कर लूँगा. And he rewrites whole thing. So you have Dinman had some of the best coverage. He and Renu go out to cover drought. And even the chatpata thing that he does, आम के 100 नाम बताइए, 10 रुपए. Krishna Kumar said he was a hero of Tikamgarh because Krishna Kumar was winning one after the other. His name, if you see early issues of Dinman, he's kind of a rock star there in Tikamgarh. He says, wow, and he says such a remarkable thing that Dinman was a university in itself for a small town. I don't think in Hindi, even in English, political journalism, there's been a better political journalism than Dinman. And mind you, without much staff. His whole battle with the management of Times of India, I have written in great detail. And he did it. So his journalism was remarkable. Even Vak is so different. You find people like A.K. Ramanujan, struggling A.K. Ramanujan writing to him, please publish my poems, translations, everything is happening. He was a remarkable as a journalist.
The interview with Yasunari Kawabata.
Yasunari Kawabata, then this gentleman, this artist in Sri Lanka,
George Keat.
Look at the article on George Keat. And the kind of people he get, Richard Bartholomew's there, Raghuveer Sahayaka joins as assistant editor. So it's a remarkable. Only thing is कि he also continues with journalism. खुलता है बंद होता है, खुलता है बंद होता है, 3 इशू आए वाक्य, नया प्रतीक फिर भी चला थोड़े दिन, फिर वो भी बंद हो गया अंत में. So that was the biggest, and by then he's old. By Naya Pratik, he's old. He had it. He's kind of.
But what about Navbharat Times and
Navbharat Times? Once he enters, it's a complete. It's a hellhole. Everyone is making money. Bureau chief is making money. Sports guy is running a sports federation. If you see what happens the moment he joins Navbharat Times, he's full of complaints. People in Bombay Bureau of Navbharat Times are doing satta. The city reporters are making money. How do you clean a mess like this? And he cleans the mess. He tries to clean the mess. He gets some people point blank tell him, because they've been senior for far too long, I don't want to name him, he's very much alive and very active. He straight away tells him, I'm not writing editorial. I'll write when I feel like. So he's filling all kinds of things. So Navbharat Times is not an easy game. It's also behemoth. It's Times of India behemoth, where the Hindi journals and publications are stepchildren. This thing. Dinman, he had already faced it. Navbharat Times happened also because being Times of India, what it is, they saw, he was very close to JP, this, that, so get him. Overnight this happened. He writes one letter to Leonard Nathan that something is happening, it seems, it will happen. And he suddenly, post-emergency, he's the editor of Navbharat Times. And he's trying to clean the mess. I don't think he succeeds, but he tries to make editorial, reporters, lot of environmental coverage of in that place in Navbharat Times. So he does it, yeah.
Now, towards the end of his life, he set up Vatsal Nidhi. Yeah. And Vatsal Nidhi started organizing writers' camps. And became controversial when they had a Janak and the normal impression or the allegation was that Agyeya is turning towards some kind of soft Hindutva or whatever on the one hand. On the other, there are facts that he wrote a very strong editorial.
Yes, one of the best pieces on Hindutva written by Agyeya in Dinman.
Yeah.
And even against RSS, when he says na Rashtra hai, na Sangh hai, na Swayam Sevak hai. So yes, this phase which you're talking about, yes, he himself calls it's a phase of Indianness. He's obsessed with this idea of Indianness, stroke Hinduness, whatever we want to call it. And it's also the kind of people, it's Messiah who is in the last stage of life. He's surrounded himself with super mediocre people. Some of the brightest people who were with him had kind of moved away by then. The last of them being Raghuveer Sahai and Sarveshwar Dayal Saxena. If you look at the people who were going to these camps, you'll be surprised. None of them are they're all coming up. He's in Malyaj writes in great detail in his diary about interaction with some of the writers, and he says, what is wrong with him? He has no self-respect. He's talking to him and this man doesn't even open his mouth. He's staring, and one of his Sagir writer is just going on. By then he had become Messiah. I think he's getting taken in. He had started believing. He attended 1980 BJP formation thing. Advani writes to him. He attended even some of the book launches against this usual thing of which BJP and RSS have been very about, Hindus in Pakistan. That kind of some report which Malkani was releasing. He goes for that. Advani especially writes to him, you have to come, and I cross-checked with reporters who were there in 1980. They said yes, one person I know interviewed him also for some Gujarati magazine. I will still not say, I'll give him that benefit of doubt. Yes, he's even become ritualistic. He's gone to, I think, Bikaner, and Nandkishore Acharya organizes a havan for him for long life because he's been keeping bad health. And the whole thing is that पूरे दिन का हवन है, तो आप सुबह थोड़ी देर बैठकर हवन को उसकी शुरुआत कर दीजिए, फिर बाकी लोग उसको पूरा करेंगे. horoscope gets made. I don't know how much he believed in it. He was getting taken in. It's also this health and all. You make you do things which you never believed in. But yes, his whole concern. If you read those extensive diaries of Janki Yatra, और इवन सोमनाथ वाली जो उनकी थी, और एक जो उन्होंने यहाँ किया था वृंदावन में. So Vrindavan he gets that sadhu to inaugurate that civil, and he's seeing all kinds of stuff which is mind blowing. Why was he asked to do it? So there is something happening there. Or maybe it's a persistent attack which have made him do like this, but that can't be a justification. You know? But I don't think if he was alive today, he would have approved of all that is happening now. It was too much of a mind, he had a mind of his own to kind of support any of this.
Now, do we have the some maybe 10 minutes or so for questions? Please be brief, sharp. Yes? Yeah, there. Just a minute. Take the mic. Yeah, please.
ये अक्षय, जब इतना एडिटर ने मिलके सारा काट ही दिया, तो बचे हुए चीजों को लाके हम चुनाव क्यों नहीं कर देते बचे?
तो फिर किताबों के पीछे किताब ऑलरेडी लोग कह रहे हैं कि किताब इतनी मोटी है और तो मतलब हो गया मतलब should be now and should move on to something else. Yeah. But that happens with all the writing, you know, all eventually gets cut.
Yes. Just please wait for the. एक मिनट को माइक. हाँ.
एक क्रांतिकारी कलाकार में कन्वर्ट होना चाहता है, नदी के द्वीप और शेखर एक जीवनी में भी. वो जहाँ तक मैंने अभी तो पूरी पुस्तक नहीं पढ़ी आपकी, जहाँ तक ये एस्पेक्ट बहुत डिटेल में या इसको कवर नहीं किया गया, क्या आपने इसे इग्नोर किया या महत्वपूर्ण नहीं समझा इस बात को?
नहीं, किसके उनके ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन को नहीं, ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन का उनका देखिए, ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन हिज राइटिंग इज हैपनिंग इवन बिफोर ही गोज टू जेल. सम बिट ऑफ राइटिंग इज हैपनिंग. He wanted to become a physicist, which he failed with his 3rd division in physics in BSc in Foreman Christian College. That dream was over. He actually wanted to be a physicist with Bernard, which doesn't happen. So he's writing. He's been writing even as an intermediate student. That transformation, what is his dream? His whole transformation as a writer has to come out in various ways, not only in Sekhar Ek Jivni. So you find what are his dream diaries? How many people we know, and dream diaries are in great detail in the book. Dream diaries, if you see the part of dream diary, everything creeps into his Sekhar. So there is, there cannot be a definite date when I am starting Sekhar today. That's what happens with Usantare. But these diaries, bulk of his diaries have crept into Sekhar. Nadi Ke Dweep, what is the relationship with Kripa Sen? If not, so Kripa Sen is written in great detail, and if you find, and I'm sure you have read, and you will find that Islands in the Nadi Ke Dweep is entirely this relationship with Kripa Sen and the conundrum of joining the war or not joining the war, of being against fascism or not being against the fascism. So I have done it with great detail. Maybe it was not what you think. Maybe we can talk about it, but I have tried, because the whole process of his writer, how he becomes writer, and some of these works come out, including Tar Saptak. I was careful enough to kind of write. Maybe it's not sufficient if you think so, yeah.
Yes.
अक्षय मुकुल जी,
जी.
ये जयंत कुमार ने जब
एक मिनट उधर दे दी. अच्छा, आप एक.
ये कहा जाता है कि जयंत कुमार ने अज्ञे की कहानियों का संग्रह हो रहा था जो दिया था जयशंकर प्रसाद को भूमिका लिखने के लिए, तो प्रसाद ने उसकी भूमिका नहीं लिखी थी, रिफ्यूज कर दिया था. तो थोड़ा इसके बारे में भी आपने कुछ किताब में लिखा है, और जयशंकर प्रसाद के क्या रिश्ते, किस तरह जयशंकर प्रसाद के लोगों के मन में क्या बातें थी, ये सब कुछ लिखा है आपने?
देखिए, नहीं लिखने वाली बात, मतलब ये बहुत जगह मैंने पढ़ा है, इसका पासिंग रेफरेंस भी है, बट इट्स नॉट लाइक अ बिग स्टोरी ऑफ हिज लाइफ. जयशंकर प्रसाद ये भी कहते हैं कि मैंने बाकियों का भी मैं नहीं लिखता there could be a jealousy, there could be, I didn't find anything. Otherwise, हिंदी जगत में क्या होता है कि अगर आप तथ्य को छोड़ दें तो गॉसिप पे आप पूरा किताब लिख सकते हैं किसी की नहीं, ये लिखा है, लोगों ने लिखा है, मैं मानता हूँ इस बात को कि नहीं जयशंकर प्रसाद ने किस वजह से नहीं लिखा, दिस इज अ मैटर ऑफ स्पेकुलेशन। जयशंकर प्रसाद ये भी कहते हैं कि मैं किसी की किताब की प्रस्तावना
उन्होंने शायद किसी किताब की भूमिका
लिखी ही नहीं, तो ये कहते हैं। तो एक स्पेशल उनको इनसे कोई परेशानी थी, मुझे कहीं मिला नहीं। और जयशंकर प्रसाद से अज्ञे का बहुत ज़्यादा इंटरेक्शन नहीं है, जहाँ तक मुझे उनकी कागज़ों में और जहाँ मतलब उस पूरे इकोसिस्टम में जितने लोगों का आप कागज़ देखते हैं जिनके एग्जिस्टेंस में हो, तो आपको नहीं मिलता है। तो इसीलिए मैंने जितना हो सकता था कि इस तरह की बातों को मतलब मेंशन है, बट इट्स नॉट सच अ बिग इम्पोर्टेंट फैक्ट ऑफ अगेज लाइफ।
नहीं, फिर एक बार वो निराला से मिलने गए हैं कि जब उन्होंने किताब लेख लिखा था निराला इज डेड,
हाँ,
उसके बाद एक वो इलाहाबाद में मिलने गए हैं।
हाँ हाँ, वो उन्होंने स्मृति लेखा में खुद लिखा है, अज्ञे ने उसको स्मृति लेखा में वो पूरा इंटरेक्शन लिखा है। और फिर निराला के साथ उनके रिश्ते ठीक थे, मतलब निराला वाज अ मैवरिक, तो he'll go, he'll not go, he'll charge money, he had his mood swings, जो भी थी निराला की जो स्थिति थी। तो निराला के साथ उनके रिश्तों के बारे में काफ़ी है, किताब में भी है। और उन्होंने जो निराला पे अटैक किया था 21-22 साल के थे जब, तो उसके बारे में भी काफ़ी विस्तृत वर्णन है उसमें। अब वो तो पता नहीं, क्योंकि अगेन मतलब दिस इज लाइक गेटिंग टू द रेल्म ऑफ गॉसिप, बट अब उन दोनों का नहीं बनता था। बनारसी दास चतुर्वेदी खुद ही बहुत बड़े मठाधीश थे हिंदी के, तो उनसे बनना, क्योंकि वो बहुतों के करियर विशाल भारत की वजह से बनना और बिगड़ना रहता था, तो अज्ञे को भी छोड़ना पड़ा विशाल भारत, क्योंकि वो रिमोट कंट्रोल से चलाना, संपादक वही बने रहना चाहते थे आगरा में बैठ के या टिकमगढ़ जहाँ भी थे वो तो प्रॉब्लम था। लेकिन बाकी रिश्तों के बारे में मुझे नहीं पता, बनारसी दास चतुर्वेदी और निराला के रिश्तों का।
I think Agyeya was a multi-dimensional personality. He had a different of layers of his life, starting from revolutionary and reactionary. Ultimately, he was a love legend. The way he had a relationship, Ila Arun and Kapila Vasudeva.
Ila Arun, नहीं, sorry, इनसे Ila Dalmia. Ila Arun.
So he mentioned in his own article, he had two drills in which they made some opudi and they are used to make love. It was a very innovative way of loving.
Nobody knows whether they were making love or not. He had built that little tree house. Making love or not is complete, again, is a realm of lurid gossip which completely shadows in the world, so I'll not get into that. But yes, the title of the book says multitudes, writer, rebel, soldier, lover. And he used to always quote Walt Whitman saying that, well, I am contained multitudes. So yes, it's there in the book, and that's precisely what I've tried to do. I don't know how far I've succeeded. Yes.
As we are on the gossip,
yeah,
the gossip used to be.
I have a question also to you, which I'll ask later.
Achha, so then ask it.
Yeah. The question is about your relationship with Agyeya.
Oh my God.
Yeah. The question is that, कहते he's a poet of grandeur. जब आप पहली बार महफिल में लिखते हैं, that's like a remarkable. I use it as a reference point even now to understand Agyeya. और 10 साल भी नहीं हुआ होगा जब आप लिखते हैं बुढ़ा गिद्ध पंख क्यों फैलाए, from Eliot line. So and subsequent the frosty relationship that you had with him. What was it? Was it just that article which did it, or was the larger thing which was happening in the Hindi world around that time?
No, I mean, this is not the occasion, but anyway, since you have asked it, you see, I was very young and I started getting in touch with what turned out to be the major trinity of Hindi poets of the last 40 years. That is Agyeya, Muktibodh and Shamsher. Yeah. I started corresponding with them, inviting them, etc. They all wrote in a journal which I brought out called Samved at the age of 19 with some other friends. And it was, what was the name? CM
Naeem.
CM Naeem.
Naeem sir.
Chaudhary Mohammad Naeem,
Yeah.
who was in
Chicago.
Chicago,
Yeah.
and he wrote me a letter asking me to write an article. I had just passed my MA, and I had not written any article in English so far. I was given to understand that it was Agyeya who had suggested my name.
Yeah.
I mean, I was given to understand. There's I never asked him, but I somehow.
One thing is definitely that when even Namwarji's name was there and he was not sending, so Agyeya definitely told him, leave it. If he's not sending, you carry on without him. That much is there.
Anyway, so I wrote that article, which is around 62, 63.
Yeah, around that.
When the special issue on Agyeya, Mahfil came out. When his Kitni Nao Mein Kitni Baar came out, I had cordial relationship. Vatsyanji used to come from Berkeley and bring books that I would ask him to bring. Gabriela Mistal's collection of poems, the poem itself by Stanley Crenshaw, whatever the name of the American critic, these books he brought for me. So there was a very cordial relationship, but somehow that book, and it is not as if I had not personally told him earlier that I did not like this or did not like that. That I had already done, as you have, I had forgotten that, but you have brought it on record. So, but that bugged me. And I was full of T.S. Eliot at that time, the MA students, Yeats and Eliot and Auden and things of that kind. So I picked up this word, which I think was unfortunate on second thoughts. I still stand by the attack, because it was a young poet critic's attack on a senior person. And it made, it established my credentials as a critic in a certain sense.
Yes, it did.
Although that was not the reason why I wrote it. By that time, the Hindi literary world has moved on to this paradigm of a duality between Agyeya and Muktibodh. And since Muktibodh has not been able to see even his first book of poems, I felt very emotionally hurt. And I used to think that if Agyeya had intervened and responded to my request several years ago, perhaps a book could have come out. So I still hold that grudge, because it hurt me very deeply. Now, but when I started my public work in culture in Madhya Pradesh, I invited him all the times.
That's...
Now, once he accepted in the initial stages, he came and he read in Kala Parishad. He read for 1.5 hours. And he kept on, people kept on asking, अरे आपने ये कविता तो पढ़ी नहीं, तो अच्छा वो मैं पढ़ लेता. फिर कोई कह, अरे आपने ये नहीं पढ़ी. And he was very happy. We had dinner, Rashmi and I, and it's very bond. But when I sent him a check of 400 rupees, he wrote back saying that मुझे पता नहीं था कि ये सरकारी संस्था है और इसलिए मैं इसको वापस कर रहा हूँ. I wrote back saying कि in the same manner, it is a सरकारी संस्था, Sahitya Academy is a सरकारी संस्था, and you sort of take part in activities in Sahitya Academy, and you write in Aajkal, which is a direct publication of Government of India. There is no autonomous institution in between. So how is it that you are applying this to me? So in a manner, I rubbed some...
So therefore in 86, I believe, 75 years, that you also refused saying कि मैं नहीं आता, मैं आगे के बारे में ज़्यादा जानता नहीं, तो मैं आकर क्या करूँगा?
That was because Vatsyanji had attacked me
I can see
as an officer in one of his things. And I thought that this was very unfair. Two things were unfair. One, I had learned the lesson of self-respect and courage and freedom in the school of Vajpeyi. I learnt all these values from him, and now if I start operating those values, he takes offense. That was one. The second one was, so when I was invited by L.M. Singhvi, and in this speech where Kumarji came,
75.
so I wrote back saying that I am a civil servant.
I know, I remember
I
that later.
have very little knowledge of poetry, whatever, and therefore I would not be the proper person to be in this grand celebration.
I know, that's all that way.
So but then I kept on writing to him and kept on pursuing. Finally, I had a long, here in India International Center, I had a long conversation with Ilaji. And I told that, look, whatever I'm doing in the field of arts, this is Agyeya who has taken the initiative earlier, in the field of literature, all this, I had learned from him. Now I am doing this, and the major figure, my major inspiration, is absent. So finally, Agyeya ji agreed to come. And incidentally, the moment he came, Nambaji and his his co-writers started attacking Bharat Bhavan as turning anti-democratic. So it was democratic as long as he was not coming. As long as Nama Singh was coming, it was democratic. But as soon as, and mind you, he came only twice. And that is, in fact, he was in Bhopal with us 4 days before he died. He died on the 4th April. He was there till 31st March. Ramesh Shah and I went to see him off at the railway station. And railway station, because the train was late, we were sort of walking up and down. And it is there he said that you should join Vatsan Nidhi, which I joined later.
Yeah, you joined later,
But earlier when he invited me once to this camp, I had also declined, which was only trying to tell him again and again that I am following your... We published a special number of Purvagrah, in which we selected 10 or 11 poems. And there was one article each, on each of the poems. There was an article by Baki Shukla, whoever, on Asadhivina. And Agyeya ji refused to give permission to publish that poem. So we just wrote कि हमको अनुमति न मिलने के कारण हम वो कविता नहीं छाप रहे.
So therefore, in Naya Pratik also he makes that limerick about Madhya Pradesh में तरह-तरह के लोग चढ़ने आते हैं.
No, I mean, so in a sense, it's a very interesting relationship.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
I mean, in the sense that it starts with adoration, a critical adoration at that, may I remind you, that even then, whatever I did not like, I pointed out to him. Sometimes he responded well, and sometimes perhaps he kept quiet. That's all right. And it moves into from adoration to a critical celebration. Then it goes on to, say, let's say, a more critical condemnation and things of that kind. But in my mind, it was never, for a moment, I never thought that Agyeya was less than a major writer, whose influence on Hindi was enormous. There is no denying the fact. After all, look at the young writers he published for the first time. Not only in Pratik, but also this series in which there was the first book of Raghuveer Sahai, the first book of Sarveshwar Saxena, the first book of Ajit Kumar, etc. So there is no... Yes?
इससे पहले आप उठ जाएंगे तो फिर
नहीं
बातचीत आप पे टर्न हो गई तो बिना आपने साहित्य की बहुत बात की और साहित्य के बाद में तो आप जर्नलिस्ट वापस हो गए, इनके पीछे पड़ गए। पर मैं तो ये ध्यान दिलाना चाह रहा था कि आगे की जो संबंध थे भगत सिंह से तो उतने नहीं, चंद्रशेखर आजाद के साथ, नेहरू जी के साथ उन्होंने भूमिका लिखी, प्रेजेंटेशन अदर पोइम्स की। फिर नेहरू अभिनंदन ग्रंथ का संपादन अकेले किया। जेपी उनके साथ जो रिश्ते थे, और कुमार प्रसाद जी बैठे हैं, बहुत निकट रहे, बल्कि कई बातें इन्होंने बताई थी जब वहाँ कदम कुआं जाते थे। पर वो जो उनका साप्ताहिक निकाला था,
एवरीमैन्स वीकली, एडिटर थे उनके आगे।
हाँ, और उसके बाद और क्रांतिकारियों के साथ में जो रिश्ते, यशपाल के साथ खासकर, और जब चंद्रशेखर आजाद ने कहा कि उनको गोली मारने का
वो है काफी है।
और चंद्रशेखर आजाद के बारे में तो एक बार उन्होंने मुझको कहा था कि कई लोगों में जब उनका बहुत बड़ा व्यक्तित्व बन जाता है तो उनकी खामियों को नहीं देखना चाहिए, पर कुछ खामियां उनको मालूम थी। पर भगत सिंह को छुड़ाने के लिए जो संबंध उनका था, तो मैं ये कहना चाह रहा था कि ये जो उनका पहलू था कि ये बहुत सारे जो पर्सनैलिटीज हुई क्रांतिकारियों में, नेताओं में, और राजनीतिक जो उनके जो रिश्ते थे, एक तरफ नेहरू के साथ और उसके बाद में जेपी के साथ, और फिर आपने जो थोड़ा इशारा किया कि शायद बाद में जो है, मैं तो नहीं मानता हूँ कि कोई उस तरीके से वो हिंदुत्व की तरफ, उस दौर में, राज के दौर में तो फासला भी था और आयोजनों में वहाँ पे वो गए, पर उसके बारे में किताब में जो है वो ज्यादा चीज नहीं आ पाती है, ऐसा मैं आपको नहीं लगता?
किस भगत सिंह वाले फेज के बारे में आप कह रहे हैं?
भगत सिंह वाला तो
क्रांतिकारी वाले फेज,
क्रांतिकारी वाले फेज
में वही
शेखर से रिश्ता बहुत क्लोज था।
हाँ, बहुत क्लोज था। तो वो क्लोजनेस मैं उसमें भी देखिए 3-4, एक है कहानियाँ किंवदंतियाँ हैं, एक है रिकॉर्ड। अगर आप कॉलोनियल रिकॉर्ड्स देखें और उनके कंटेम्प्रेरी, जैसे वैशम पायन ने बहुत लंबी चौड़ी किताब लिखी है, फिर यशपाल ने लिखी है, हालांकि यशपाल वाज अ कॉमन टारगेट ऑफ ऑल दिस पीपल बिकॉज ऑफ हिज सो कॉल्ड ड्यूबियस रोल। तो ये और कुछ अप्रूवर्स के अगर आप डिपोजिशन देखें कॉलोनियल रिकॉर्ड्स में, तो उस दिन तो चंद्रशेखर आजाद के बारे में आता है बहुत कुछ। मैंने उतना मेंशन किया है कि he used to get along very well with his comrades. He had a very influential character. People loved him, and all that comes out. But beyond that, I found that there's even the contemporaries are not writing. People who were there, right from the killing of Bhagwati Charan Bohra in the bomb blast का जो उनका मिसहैप होता है, वहाँ से लेकर यहाँ तक कि वो एक और जैसी कहानी है कि अज्ञेय उनको छुड़ाने वाले थे जेल से, भगत सिंह को छुड़ाने वाले में वो ड्राइवर उन्हें बनना था। अब आप कॉलोनियल रिकॉर्ड्स में देखें तो कोई एक सिंह का नाम है, ये हो सकता है कि नाम बदल के अज्ञेय ने नाम बदल के वहाँ किया, बट डिस्पाइट माई बेस्ट अटेम्प्ट्स आई कुडंट गेट एनीथिंग। आई डिडंट वांट टू रिलाई टू मच ऑन दिस काइंड ऑफ वेरी, हाँ उन्होंने, लेकिन अज्ञेय जैसे वो रघुवीर साहे वाले जो लंबी इंटरव्यू है रघुवीर साहे वाले में, उसमें अज्ञेय इज ऑल्सो वेरी कॉशियस। अज्ञेय इस बात को नहीं कहते कि मैं छुड़ाने वाला। चंद्रशेखर आजाद का सबसे ज्यादा वही बात करते हैं कि बड़े दमदार थे और कॉमरेड्स में उनकी बड़ी बनती थी, लोग उनको बहुत चाहते थे, एंड द ड्यूबियस रोल दैट सम ऑफ द कॉमरेड्स वर प्लेइंग विद हिम।
पर असल में प्रेम के जो किस्से हैं ना, किस्से भी हैं और सच्चाई भी है, और जो साहित्य के साथ उनका रिश्ता है वो तो बहुत आया है, पर रिवॉल्यूशन के साथ और आजादी के साथ और बंटवारे के लिए मेरे ख्याल में पहले आदमी थे, और दोबारा दूसरा उदाहरण नहीं मिलता,
शरणार्थी वगैरह
जिन्होंने पार्टीशन पर
वो है प्रतीक में उन्होंने छापा सबसे पहले, प्रतीक के पहले,
और बाद में पार्टीशन पे जो 14 कविताएं लिखी, मेरे ख्याल में हिंदी के दूसरे किसी कवि ने,
हाँ उनका इमीडिएट था, तो प्रतीक में काफी है मेंशन, मैंने उन कविताओं का काफी जिक्र किया है, वो जो शरणार्थी कविताएं।
इसमें क्या महिलाओं का जिक्र ही ज्यादा हो गया?
एक महिला पूछना चाहती है।
This is directed at you. In your student days, you used to admire Agyeya. In your student days, you were admiring Agyeya, as I remember. What provoked you to write an article in Dharmyu? थोड़ा गिद्ध पग क्यों चला?
वो बता दीजिए।
Well, it is not the only article that I wrote in Karnataka. There was a series running in which I was writing book reviews as articles. So there was an article on Shrikant Verma, there was an article on Prabhakar Vajpeyi, etc. At that time I was in a slightly aggressive mood, phase of a critic wanting to say, you can't get away with things like that. So I think in that euphoria of not allowing anybody to get away with it, I bounced upon him. And I genuinely did not like it. But there was a very interesting irony. This book got the Jnanpith Award.
Yeah. Something which he himself never liked. Something which he privately never liked. He said कि किसी और को मिलना, किसी और पुस्तक के लिए मिलना चाहिए था.
But Lakshmi Chandan wrote to me that I should write the essay on Agyeya on this poem. So I wrote back to him saying, I have already written a devastating article now, how can I write? So, but this is what is happening. I still regret the title. It was too much. He was only 60 something.
Yeah,
he was barely 65. I am 82 and I still don't call myself old. Why should the old eagle stretch its wings? I am old. I am an old eagle now, and I am stretching my wings all too often. But that was but the impact it had was tremendous, both in terms of establishing me as a critic, but also in a manner of speaking, marking a premature decline of Agyeya. Agyeya did not decline as a poet. There are 2 or 3 books, Nadi Ki Bank पर
छाया, नदी की बात,
और सागर मुद्रा.
ऐसा कोई घर आपने देखा है, वो भी है लास्ट में.
There are at least
महावृक्ष के
25 good poems in these 3 books, which I did not anticipate. I was taken in by this fury on the decline which I thought I was discerning.
Fast and Furious.
Huh?
Fast and Furious.
Yeah. Now last one, because we are running out of time. Yes, please. I will just wait for it.
Akshaya, congratulations. This is about the writer. इतनी मोटी पुस्तक, इसके पहले एक और मोटी पुस्तक from someone who was literally forced every evening to finish what he had to say in 350 to 400 words max.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2 things. एक तो what did it take you to become what you have become with 2 great books? And second, it's a technical thing. Logistically, what's the element of research? कितना अंदर जाना पड़ा? Where did you find it? Archives क्या था? कहाँ से लाया? ये 2 बात.
इस केस में basically I'll not talk about myself. I'll just talk about the archives. Archives is basically to Agyeya's papers. I was very lucky. Well, many people in this hall, Thanvi ji, Ashok ji, everyone gave me access to those papers. But that didn't complete the story. Like it happens with all archives, and many of my fellow archive friends are here who come from library. You're just trying, half the time is gone, joining the dots, building the narrative. Narrative can take you, joining the dots can take you many places. In case of Agyeya, I never imagined I'll find the dots in Chicago, or in Stanford, in Hoover Institution, or Rockefeller Archives, or in the diaries of Shadbourne Gilpatrick, and various other contemporaries of his, who are like, whose papers are very much in India, Sivdan Singh Chauhan, for instance. All of them, Nemi Chand Jain, Janendra Kumar, Premchand himself, some of his letters, which is all here. So that took a long time, because his papers are massive, almost 70,000 pages, I guess. Despite, he was very meticulous to have kept those papers. But despite that, it took a long time to join the dots. So that, once you get into it, you kind of become obsessive, then you start loving those dark, dingy rooms, and you just do it. Jandewala, in fact, the first time when we went, along with Thanvi ji, it was, the 20 trunks of our guest papers were lying in the godown of Sasta Sahitya Mandal. So in fact, I literally dragged Thanviji. We went, first day we did the Moana, second day, third day I got a truck, loaded those 20 trunks, got them to Jansatta apartment next to his apartment, where I took a flat, a portion of the apartment, and just mindlessly over 3 months, 4 months, we just scanned every bit of it. And I had 2 scanners who were my friends, and we'll just look at some paper, I'll get excited. Those 2 guys will not even understand why this guy is so excited. Including one day when finding Kripa Sin's papers, she was so much in love with Agyeya, she even had put her hair, cut her hair and put a whole lock of hair and put it in one of the letters. And this guy said, I'm not scanning this. ये मैं scan नहीं करूँगा. ये 70-80 साल पुरानी बाल हैं किसी के. मेरे कुछ नहीं होता. भूत नहीं है इसमें. So it's great fun. Archive is kind of depressing, but it's kind of great fun also. Yeah. So that's what.
And you'll say something about the author himself.
Yes.
No, nothing.
Harish, you must be the last one now.
Congratulations, Akshay.
Thank you, sir.
I've not read a biography of any Indian, not only a writer, but any Indian perhaps, including political biographies, which have achieved what you have offered. Not only will it be a benchmark, as Ashokji was agreeing with me, for literary biographies. Actually, about literary biographies, no, I will not go into that. I'll just ask questions. I will not offer my comments. I will save them for when Ashokji organizes a day-long conference on your book. Then we'll talk about it in detail. My 2 questions are, I read in your book about all this tremendous amount of scanning and saving of the documents. What is going to happen to that scanned archive in terms of availability and accessibility? That's number 1. And number 2, one thing that I missed in your biography was 150 pages of documentation of which source you're quoting from.
Yeah.
But sometimes the context makes it clear. But sometimes it's not clear whether the source, original source, was in Hindi or in English. And did you think about indicating that by just...
Yes, I agree with you. I'll answer this. Yes, that could have been. Actually, that was pointed out to me even when the Gita Press book happened, and I should have been more careful. So I kind of assume that if I'm quoting Naya Pratik, it's in Hindi, what else can it be? English, so it's in the text. But yeah, I could have been more careful with this. And as for the archive is concerned, that's entirely the property of Vatsal Nidhi. And so the trustees will decide on what fate these papers and the scanned documents do. So I was under the obligation to write, I've written, now they'll decide the fate of those papers. Yeah.
So friends, those who have not read the book should have been by now inspired or provoked or to read the book. It reads very well. It is extremely readable. It reads like a novel. This is a story of a great Indian writer and written in such style that it is very absorbing. You get glued to it. It is very, as you see, it's very thick and therefore awe-inspiring. But once you get hold of it and you start prying into it, you'll find that it's also the story of that time. Also the story of what was happening in the Hindi world. There is very little. In fact, I was reminded by who said the other day, Yogen Yadav, I think, said, that your first book seemed to have brought out how regressive the Hindi public world was or is. On the other hand, this book brings out how dynamic and
progressive,
cosmopolitan and modernizing the Hindi world is.
Yeah, it is, and it shows the other side completely, and also shows the complete disconnect. He also explains, and this all book discussion. Actually, the idea of the book started with this. Vasudha Dalmia asking me, "Did Agyeya write for Kalyan or any of this?" I said, "No, not that I could find." And there was again, I was going through large treasure trove of Gita press papers. I never found it. And Premchand was asked, and Nirala was asked, and they wrote reluctantly. You could see. So that's where it started, that how come this man who's at the center of, if you see all the debates from early 30s till 87, literary debates, he's very much at the center of it, or is part of it. As an effect, he's not there. And that also tells you the larger Hindi world which was completely keeping away from it, from that regressive Hindi sphere. Yeah.
So with that, we come to the end of it, and we hold the book for the photographs, is it? Who's going to take the photograph? Pick up your copy if those fellows have not run away.